EU5 is right around the corner and is going to offer you about a gajillion different states to play, from massive empires to middling kingdoms and up-and-coming tryhards. You might be fully independent, in a struggling poly-crown relationship, or one of a few hundred microstates in a decentralized empire where nobody really knows what's going on. The question then becomes, who the heck should you play as first? Whether you have a bazillion hours in EU4 or absolutely zero, I'm going to give you a rundown on which states you might want to play first, ranking the 10 best states to play from worst to best. Now, which states that might be does of course vary for each and every one of us and because of several reasons, so tell me which states you are primed to play first and if my picks here make any sense. At number 10 and the worst of the best is China. Now, why China, you ask? Aren't I primed to be extremely powerful? Yes, you probably are, my friend, as long as you know what you're doing, and if I know EU5 and Paradox, you will not know what you're doing when you first launch this game. China does likely offer an exciting campaign based on what we know so far. As with EU5's new mechanics, you'll have to balance a massive population with a bunch of different cultures, various internal power dynamics, and of course the growing potential threat of Western countries and their newfound colonial empires in the mid to late game. However, once you're more familiar with the game and you've learned how to balance trade, populations, productions, and the military, China has the potential to become much more viable. But for now, even though I rank it as the 10th most fun country to play as on launch, China lands at the worst of the best on this list. At number 9, we're going to have to talk about the Eastern Roman Empire. Perhaps the state with the most to gain in EU5 from EU4 is the Eastern Roman Empire, and also known as Byzantium. Whereas before, Byzantium pretty much played Russian roulette with a fully loaded gun, it now starts off as significantly larger. And even though it's on the decline by 1337, with an ascendant Ottoman realm growing in Anatolia, it now has a much bigger chance of survival. That does not mean it's safe. Byzantium is surrounded by potential enemies and perils, and with EU5's new mechanics, making the optimal use of the population, resources, and military power you have left will be crucial. As such then, I believe Byzantium will be a tough nut to crack for first-timers, but thanks to its more compact size, I do believe shrewd diplomatic maneuvering and sound defensive action can save this once great empire. The reason why I put Byzantium here instead of China is because of that size. Despite difficulties, I do believe Byzantium's size makes it easier to handle for a new player. And also, it's generally a bit more fun to begin as a smaller entity and build your way up than the opposite. And for all of these reasons, that's why Byzantium lands at spot number 9. At number 8 comes the Ashikaga Shogunate, and it's for a few reasons. The Shogunate will probably offer a mix of a challenging beginning and cozy isolationism, seeing as Japan is fragmented at best during its feudal age. However, managed to unite the island, and I think Japan will offer one of the best feeling development games in the game, and if you play your cards right, you might even be able to begin colonizing East Asia yourself, and create a powerful navy that can face both China and the Western powers later on. Don't take the Japanese factions lightly though. If EU4 is anything to go by, China will be extremely difficult to deal with, and properly uniting the Japans might take longer than you think. And because of that, time will be of the essence, but if you do manage to win your battles, building a stable and prosperous Japan with a growing population sounds like a lot of fun, which is why it comes in at number 8. At number 7 comes the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, and the reason why I think this is going to be an awesome playthrough is partly because of the fact that the Mamluks is the hegemonic Muslim faction in this time period, of course rivaled by the up-and-coming Ottomans or the various Persian powers to the east. It's not too long since the Crusaders were kicked out of the Levant, and despite needing to consolidate its vast empire stretching from Libya in the southwest to Syria in the northeast, I believe a dedicated player can strengthen Egypt's core and not only keep the Ottoman challengers at bay, but even expand Egypt to the Pillars of Hercules and beyond. For Egypt, both a powerful navy and a strong land army will be crucial to succeed, and that's also why I think it's going to be so much fun. It will likely be somewhat challenging to balance its large population for new players, but I think the challenge will be good, and since it's nowhere near as large as China for example, it will also likely be easier to manage. At number 6 and almost halfway there comes the Serene Republic of Venice. Venice is one of the most powerful players in Italy, which likely makes it a decent middle power to start as. But I think its manageable population, good economy, and opportunity to forge alliances with a number of different countries makes it an extremely interesting one. What sets Venice apart though is its position as a smaller power, yet one with a strong naval position with a few overseas territories along the Adriatic. With Venice's ambitions for either Italian unification or going its own way in creating a strong merchant empire across the Mediterranean or even beyond, Venice has always seemed like an incredible choice to me. And I think EU5 with its multitude of systems will make a small to medium-sized country like Venice be a superb choice. Venice will of course face challenges that makes this tougher than you might think. The country stands on the doorstep of the Holy Roman Empire, and it borders meaningful possible rivals like Milan, while also not being far from Genoa, Austria or Hungary, which can make both maintaining and expanding your lands in Central and Southern Europe difficult. In addition, the rise of the Ottomans may put a massive damper on your ambitions in the Mediterranean, and you'll be coming up against both the Egyptian and Tunisian fleets if your ambitions lie even further south. If you can manage this though, and build yourself up over time, I think a Venice playthrough can become one of the greats, even for a first-timer. At number 5, and smack down in the middle of this thing, and may King Harald forgive me for this, lies Sweden. Located in the north, Sweden is the largest of the Scandinavian countries, with core territories in both Sweden itself and Finland, but whose king rules both Sweden and Norway, meaning that it's also in a personal union with Norway and will likely be able to integrate it after a few decades or centuries. Sweden is also rich with silver and iron mines, which makes for an excellent financial and industrial base, while even though it certainly will come up against wars with Novgorod, Denmark and likely states in the Baltics and even Germany, enjoys a relatively peaceful position. Despite beginning with a small population compared to the larger states in Europe, or indeed the massive countries elsewhere, it will both be easier to manage and can of course be expanded with the future integrations of both Norway and Denmark for a true Scandinavian kingdom, one you can even take further west across the Atlantic should you wish to play the naval game as well. It will be interesting to see just how well Sweden manages to hold up against the armies of Novgorod or later a united Russian state, how aggressive Denmark and possible allies will be, and whether Norway finds a rebellious spirit that makes internal peace difficult. But at the moment, I think Sweden is one of the top 5 best starting countries to play because of its strong and truly middle-of-the-road starting position. In at spot number 4, and it's time to talk about the Ottomans. Even though the Ottomans are nowhere near as overpowered as they are in EU4, we are turning back the clocks over 100 years here after all. The Ottomans are still moving full steam ahead, and you can treat them more or less as the new kid on the block. The Ottomans are located on the northwestern coast of Anatolia in a relatively peaceful position. Of course, they have their eyes on something much bigger than just peace, namely Constantinople. To get there though, you not only have to deal with the remaining and relatively powerful Byzantine Empire, but more acutely important are the other Ottoman or Turkic states surrounding you, known as the Beyliks. As such, I think the Ottoman campaign will come across as a good starting campaign, as you likely will be able to fairly easily expand through your neighbors and consolidate Anatolia before either going west to Constantinople, south to the Levant and Egypt, or east to Mesopotamia. That's what's so great about the Ottoman campaign, that you have a bunch of possibilities in virtually every direction, before you only much later, at least I predict, you'll have to face the truly great challengers. Due to the fairly small population, I think new players will have a decent time managing their people, but a few challenges do of course present themselves. You'll have to balance a large Greek and Christian Orthodox population with your new Turkic and Muslim one, finding some compromise or focus on conversion. This will likely bring about quite a lot of unrest as you conquer your way westward and southward in the Balkans and Anatolia. It will also be very interesting to see how much of a challenge the late-game European factions, or even the Mamluks or potentially consolidated Persian factions, will be able to pose once you've really gotten the ball rolling. However, with a small and consolidated starting position coupled with a spring in your step, I think the Ottomans will be one of the best factions for new players in EU5. We are in the top 3 now, and at number 3, I give you the Crown of Castile. Now this was a tough decision because in choosing Castile, I am discarding Portugal as a contender on this list, and here's why. Even though Portugal might be one of the most beginner-friendly countries in EU5 with its remote position and ample opportunity for overseas colonization, Castile too enjoys a relatively remote location. Sure, it will very likely end up in a few European wars, and perhaps even butt heads with Aragon unless that famous Iberian wedding decides to hit at the right time. But for the most part, Castile's first wars will likely be on its own terms, whether that be completing the Reconquista against Granada and Morocco, or attempt to consolidate Iberia on its own. Because Castile is so dominant in Iberia, it's also why I think it's almost perfect for a first-time playthrough. It holds the possibility of becoming an Iberian-focused kingdom, defending against foreign invasions both at the Pyrenees and at Gibraltar, all the while creating a formidable naval empire both in the Mediterranean and in the Americas. Or it can take the complete land army route and try to gain more European territory by island hopping through Italy and thus forming a mini Western Roman Empire, if you will. Depending on how the family and dynastic systems work, Castile even has the ability to join in the game of the Holy Roman Empire, even though it might be just a bit far-fetched for some unless the dynastic game is played well. Castile will likely have to deal with some amount of internal conflict in terms of balancing its Christian and Muslim populations, and Aragon is indeed a formidable starting enemy if push comes to shove. But in all, I believe Castile's large but manageable population, its fairly comfortable situation far to the southwest in Europe, and its future potential spells not just a safe, but an exciting playthrough for any first-time player. The second best faction to play in EU5 as a beginner is likely going to be France, and hear me out, because you might think this sounds outrageous. France begins in a wartime situation with England after all, no less than the 100 Years' War at that. This will almost immediately have you face war then, and the Black Death will also challenge you very soon. However, France begins in such an interesting position that you cannot deny that it likely will be one of the absolute best countries to play as. Whether it's the 100 Years' War or later happenings, France is likely to have one of the highest number of flavor events, and its interesting location in Western Europe will not just pit it against England, have it compete with Castile and Portugal for colonies overseas, but you're also involved, if you so choose, in the Holy Roman Empire and Germany to the east. Depending on your campaign, you could potentially reunite Charlemagne's great empire as it once looked, while moving southward into Italy as well. France will be more difficult to manage than some other countries on this list, and it is a fairly large state which will require active consolidation, but in my opinion, the rewards will be so much greater for it. As such, I think France will compete for the most flavor and unique gameplay in EU5, and will likely offer one of the two quintessential experiences in this game. Lastly then, and finally, the best faction to play first in EU5 is England. A cliché choice perhaps, but one I stand by. England, much like France, is tied up in a conflict between the two, but this presents opportunities as well. As a large island nation, England can choose to retreat or end the 100 Years' War in a loss, or attempt to take France itself under its wing. But say you lose the war then. It will undoubtedly offer a tumultuous beginning, but just like France, the future opportunities are massive. You may chill on your island and build yourself up, create a strong navy with ample trading opportunities and at least try to unite the British Isles, and the Age of Discovery is further poised to make England powerful if you manage to play the navy and colonization games well, which your island situation will likely allow you to do. I can see England having just as many, if not more, flavor events than France, but depending on your preference for gameplay and difficulty, England is likely the slightly easier faction to begin the game as due to its location, size, and safety behind its navy. This was an incredibly fun list to make, and of course, I have not played either of these nations or even tried EU5 for that matter, so this is all informed speculation based on both my own time with EU4, dev diaries, and hopes for the game. Do let me know which factions you will be starting with, if you're conflicted, if you agree with me or not, and make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!